Welcome back. Now, I did say that we're going to get into materials and make this look a little bit more exciting, and we'll do that soon, but in this video, I'm going to bring one important detail to your attention. Notice that we brought this static mesh into our project, and it was quite small, wasn't it? If I drag a new one into the world, it's tiny. It's kind of too small. We may want this to be bigger, but we know we can scale it up, right? We can scale it up as large as we like it. Now, it's tempting to just do that and call that problem solved. It was too small, now it's big enough in our world, so we're good, right? Well, something that a lot of new game developers don't realize is that when you scale your mesh up like this can impact the performance of your game. You see, now that we've scaled this mesh up in the game, in the level, it now has additional information. Its scale is no longer set to 1. So there's a transform being applied to this mesh, and that transform involves mathematical calculations done by the engine. Later on, as we get these drones moving around and flying around the level, as we're changing its location at runtime, those additional calculations imparted on this mesh due to the change in its scale have to be taken into account. This doesn't matter for the props in your environment because they just sit there, no additional calculations are necessary, but for objects that move around, that additional scaling calculation can add up. So if you're in the habit of importing your meshes into the engine and simply changing their scale like this can result in more calculations required by your machine, by the CPU, and it will be more taxing. And as games get more complex, you want to try to minimize that as much as possible to maximize your performance. So how do we get our mesh in at a larger size without having to actually scale it up and add additional mathematical calculations that our engine has to perform? Well, we can do it in a number of ways. There's a way to actually change the mesh data within the engine. We're going to get to that later in the course, but we can also change the scale as we import an FBX in those FBX import options. We're going to do that in this video. So what we're going to do is first delete the drones that we've added to our level. If you've added one or more drones, select them and delete them. And go back to your drone folder. We're going to actually delete this U asset because I'd like to import the FBX once again and change some of those default options in the FBX import menu. Now we can simply delete the SM drone asset by hitting the delete key, and we get the delete assets menu. It's showing me the asset that I'd like to delete, and if I hit delete, it's now gone. Now that material M drone, that's still here. I haven't deleted it. I'd like to keep it there. And I'd like to import that mesh once more. Now we know how to do that. We can click on import and we can select that static mesh FBX file and click on open. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to close this window. Another option is going to be to right click and choose import to game/drone. This is another way to do the same thing. If I click on import, we get the same menu and I can select that static mesh FBX file. If I click on open, I now have the FBX import options. And we mentioned in the previous video that there's this import uniform scale. We know that our static mesh is too small, and this is one way to import it at a larger size. So I can change this from 1 to 6. As I was scaling that mesh up in the viewport, I found that 6 was a pretty good scale. Now we also mentioned that a material asset was generated the last time we imported the FBX, and we mentioned that that was a setting that we could change. That setting is here in the FBX import options. It's material import method. Its default setting is create new materials, but we can click the drop down and we can choose do not create material. If I select that, now once we import the FBX, we won't get a default material created for it. And the reason is we don't need to. We already have that material created when we last imported it. So now if I click import all and reopen my content drawer, I now have the new static mesh, and we did not get a new material for it. But notice Unreal Engine was smart enough to say, hey, this is called SM drone. Maybe we should assign the drone material to it, right? And if we double click it to open the static mesh editor, sure enough, that M drone material was assigned to it. But notice that it's a little bit larger. I can hold Alt and left click to rotate around it, and I can hold Alt and right click to zoom in and out, and I see that it's a bit larger. And we can confirm this by dragging one into our level. I'm going to close the static mesh editor, open my content drawer, and drag in one of my drones and take a look. It's actually larger. And in the details panel, its scale is set to 1. We don't have to scale this thing up because we imported it at this scale of 6. It saves you the extra work of having to scale it up. If you need to drag in multiple drones into your level, well, you don't have to click on each one and scale it up. They're already at the appropriate size that they should be at. So now we know a little bit more about the FBX import options, and we're ready to start talking about materials. And we'll do that next.